What's up? This is Gilbert Arenas rocking with the 3-Point Conversion Radio. Y'all tune in. Holla at your boy.
Yep, I can.
Perfect. Sounds good. Okay. We'll jump into questions and we'll start with Sam.
Hey, Mitch, hope you're doing well. Obviously, kind of a different, challenging season with all the different circumstances. How would you evaluate how the team did kind of primarily from maybe an internal development standpoint this year, given the limited practices, limited G League, things of that nature?
Well, before I answer, yes, it's been a very unique and challenging season, with the, health and safety protocol, dealing with, the testing, the COVID, the shortened season, more games per week, testing at all hours and not consistent. Sometimes they were in the morning, sometimes they were at night, sometimes before games, sometimes after games. I mean, just keeping track, players adjusting, adapting, their schedule, trying to get sleep. Sometimes they had to come back at 11 o'clock at night and get a test. And then they had to be up in the morning and get here at 8 and get a test. And as an athlete who travels through different time zones, you don't know when you're going to fall asleep and you don't know when you're going to wake up. But to kind of have that dictated by, the testing, it's unique and it's tough. It really was. And I think our staff, our coaches, players, our medical, they did a great job of managing and navigating their way through through the season. And the NBA did a great job as well. It looks like, with certainty, they're going to complete a season and, have a very, very exciting playoff series. So having said that, one more time on the question so I get it right.
Just with all those circumstances that you just outlined, how would you evaluate the team's internal growth this year, given that you guys didn't have a whole lot of practice time? You didn't really have a normal G League season and dealing with everything in a compressed schedule nonetheless.
Right. Well, we didn't have the draft until November. And, the draft was 1 week and basically there was free agency the next week. And then soon thereafter, we were in training camp, for an abbreviated training camp. The rookies, hardly played at all in training camp. And then we started the season. We had a couple of preseason games and you're right into it. So very little practice time during the season. Thank God for the bubble, for the G League in Atlanta. I think that really helped, our young players, certainly LaMelo, played for us this year and played quite a bit. And, there's no better development than playing in an NBA game or practice. But for those players that didn't get to practice, going to Atlanta was huge. And that was a big plus. Our coaches also did a great job once the bubble in Atlanta ended, of not only managing the veterans and the season and a normal practice, travel schedule, but they did a great job continuing to develop our young players before games, getting them workouts on the court, playing 5-on-5. A lot of times we had 6 or 5 players and we had to come up with 5 other players, and we had video guys out there. We had assistant coaches out there going up and down the court, playing 5-on-5 just so, the rookies and the guys that didn't play much, at least at the beginning of the season, guys like Jalen and the Martin brothers, even they were doing it. So everybody made a huge sacrifice, to get through the season. And what we did is really no different than what any other NBA team did. So, without getting too carried away on it, everybody in this league is to be commended, to how they handle themselves, under the direction of the NBA. I did see growth amongst all our players across the board. Of course, LaMelo had great growth. And then, of course, his injury, set him back, and, coming back right in the midst of a season with a couple of games to go was a challenge that he was eager for. I don't want to go through every player because you always, leave somebody out, but I thought Miles, really made tremendous growth. Of our young players, I think the Martin brothers gave us, what we expected them to give us. I think Jalen, made a step up. I don't think anybody made a step or took a step backwards. So I think there was tremendous growth across the board. And in general, without looking at the last 2 weeks of the season, which you really can't discount, okay? But in general, I think as an organization, we took a big step forward this year.
Thank you.
Rick?
Mitch, what do you view as this team's primary needs in this coming off season?
Well, we have to sort our way through the, free agent process, with our existing free agents. Rick, as you know, both of our centers, are free agents. Devontae is also a free agent. Malik is a free agent. Brad Wanamaker is a free agent. So we have to sort, our way through, that minefield, so to speak. It's way too early. We have not, started the process, and, some of those players are unrestricted free agents. So, we're not going to have much say if they decide to do something different. Of course, keeping in mind that both of our centers are free agents, and they're both unrestricted free agents, which means we really can't, control the board, so to speak. And just looking at some of our needs in general, I think you could say that we have to look to, shore up our front court, with, a center or several centers that can, do the things that those guys can do. I don't know if you can find one guy to do it all, but you'd love to get some rim protection, some better rebounding. That sort of thing. And then, like I said, we do got free agents in the backcourt. So depending upon how that plays out, we may need some help in the backcourt. We expect everybody, when we start training camp in September, to be at 100%. And that's the good thing about, our situation right now with the injuries, all the injuries. Everybody's going to get well, and they should be 100%. So in a lot of ways, I think we're good at a lot of positions, and I think our future's bright. But our margin of error this year was really not that large that we could sustain, multiple injuries and expect to get through the season and to be able to compete at the same level at the end of the season. There were fatigue issues. Losing a player like Gordon, to some degree, Cody, Martin, of course, with Devontae, missing 17 games, that was an adjustment. And then, of course, losing LaMelo for 5 or 6 weeks, it's a lot for a team that I think out of the block, probably overachieved and delivered more than we expected. And I think that was great. It created some excitement and provided for great growth across the board. But when you lose, guys like, number one, your best player, Gordon Hayward, for the season, and everybody else has to step up, and keeping in mind our margin was not that good to begin with. Yeah, we would have preferred to have, a softer landing, for the last 2 weeks of the season. But in a lot of ways, I don't think it was unexpected.
What is your working number as far as cap room?
Well, we expect the cap to provide us with about 29 million plus. That doesn't take into consideration cap holds, for free agents that we have, nor for our first round pick. So it kind of depends, right? If you make tender offers, then your cap, freedom is going to decrease. Based on where our pick comes in, I believe, right now our pick is at a certain number, and if we move up in the lottery, then it becomes another number. But about 29 million plus would be the number, but we expect it to be less than that.
Thanks very much.
Rod?
Hey, Mitch, just wondering, first, you mentioned before about ways to kind of build a team through the draft and getting lucky to get a player. So you guys got LaMelo Ball. Just wondering, now that you've seen him for a season, how important is it for you to kind of, I guess, build around him, and just, I guess, how do you go about doing that to make sure it's done the right way, I guess?
Well, that's the job, right? That the basketball department has been given. We've upgraded, I believe, our talent in a couple of areas during the offseason. Gordon primarily would be the big upgrade. Drafting LaMelo at number 3 and having, such a promising season, even though it was cut short, gives us more clarity on the direction of the franchise. We still need to add talent. As I just mentioned, our margin of talent is not so good that we're good enough, to just, assume if there was an injury or a health and safety protocol, that we could carry on like some of the teams in the NBA do. But I do feel that we did upgrade our talent. Some of the talent that we had, got better. We do have 3 picks in the draft. I bet 2 of them are going to be in the 50s, but we do have a good pick in the first round, and we've got financial flexibility. So those are all, avenues we'll look to, but we've still got some work to do, to get to the point where we could make the playoffs, and we want to advance in the playoffs. We just don't want to make in the playoffs and lose in the first round. We want to build something that's sustainable, that, will allow us to, get into the playoffs and advance each year.
And then the other thing was, you mentioned when we talked to you after the trade deadline that you felt you guys were kind of a little bit ahead of schedule a little bit, and that was partially, I guess, for JB. On top of that, you praised him. What do you think about the job he's done this season? And, just, I guess, what do you see about him going forward? The way he's done things for you guys this past couple of years in this season as well.
Yeah, at the very top, I commended our staff and our coaching staff, for getting through this season. And, he's in charge of the coaching staff. I think he's done a great job. Like I said, we did step forward. I thought we made a nice advanced step this year in our progress. We just completed exit interviews with all the players. And, despite the ending, everybody, was really upbeat about the season. They loved the way we play the game. They love the pace that we play at. Of course, some players want to play more than others, or they just want to play more, excuse me. But by and large, everything was positive, and, he's remained hardworking and, positive, despite, the health and safety issues and, the injuries that this team, experienced this year. I mean, let's face it. I mean, we did have a lot of ankle sprains, to players. And maybe some of those kinds of things, were soft tissue. We could have, survived and continued to win games at a nice pace. But when you lose, Gordon Hayward for the season, and then you lose, your young player that turned into a pretty effective player before he got hurt, that's a lot to overcome. So I think the coach did a great job.
Thank you.
Josh?
Mitch, you spoke about the playoffs a little bit. What were your thoughts on how things went in that play-in game, and how will that affect the way you shape the roster going forward, given kind of the lack of experience, for a better term, you guys had in that play-in game?
Yeah, I think lack of experience, had a lot to do with the way that game went. Indiana, they had some experience in the playoffs, and they came out and made shots. It was a home court game for them, which I don't think is the advantage it normally would be, but it was a home court game. And they really came out, through a roundhouse, and I just didn't feel, that the understanding that it's do or die, it's the game 7, was there like it needed to be. And I think maybe some of that was due to, lack of experience. In a 7-game series, I think we've all seen, the game 1, you could lose by 20 or 30. And then in game 2, that team can come back and win that game. It can be 1-1 after 2. But it's not the case, in a do or die game or a game like that. If you're looking for silver linings, I think it was a great learning experience. We weren't going to win a championship this year anyway. We were hoping, to advance, get into the playoffs and have that experience. Of course, we would have, I believe, ended up playing Philadelphia, which would have been tough, right? We would have loved to have the opportunity. But at some point, you probably were going to go through a learning experience. And if anything, I think that's how I look at that game.
Steve?
Hey, Mitch. You talked briefly about the center position. That seems to be, just from watching that's an area you got to upgrade. What are you looking for, in a center if you do go try to find one in free agency? And the second part of that question is, do you feel like you guys will be active in free agency in terms of bringing in outside free agents? Thank you.
Well, we'll be active because, we have some financial flexibility. That doesn't mean, we'll be able to get a player if we choose to pursue a player. But we have the ability to do that. We don't control the destiny of Cody Zeller and Biz. They're both unrestricted. So, that is an area that may need to be addressed. We do have 2 young players that did not play much this year, and you did not see them play much, except maybe if you watched the G League a little bit, and that would be Nick Richards and Vern Carey. So to say that that's going to be our center core next year, yeah, that's a stretch. Okay, but we will be monitoring, their progress. The draft is not until the end of July, and free agency is not until in the beginning of August. So that's another area that we could, look to and monitor for the next 2.5 months.
Will?
Mitch, you mentioned the progression of Miles Bridges during your opening comments. Did his play this season, or did anybody else's play this season, warrant you guys thinking about a long-term extension with anybody that's currently on this roster?
Well, it's a pretty open-ended question, right? I mean, some of the rules don't allow us to extend players right now. For example, the player that you mentioned, we're not allowed to extend him anyway. And some of the players, we are allowed to extend. So, that information, we would probably share, with the representative and the agent and the player before we would share it with you. So, the areas that we can address at the appropriate time, it's only 2 days after the season ended. I plan to have meetings with our owner in the next 3 weeks. But the rules, only provide that you can do that with certain players, and then not all the players that you might think are eligible are eligible.
Correct. And just from going back to the whole free agency question, how, I guess, active in terms of the trade market do you feel like you'd be if, say, the free agency route does not go your way?
Well, we're allowed to do trades starting today, actually yesterday. So, we'll be doing that for the next 2 months. Now, the reality is there might not be any trades made. Most of the teams that are eligible to make trades, which are teams not in the playoffs, they want more clarity on the draft and, not only the players in the draft, but the position of the lottery. And then right now there's only, I think, 11 teams that are eligible to make a trade. So, you got a small size of teams, and you'll probably see more activity as teams start to leave, the playoffs. But once again, I don't anticipate, trades really until after the lottery. And we will certainly, be active. Once again, we've got the ability with our financial flexibility to do trades that normally wouldn't work. Right. And I think we've, got some players that have value across the board. So whether or not we do something, I couldn't say we would or we wouldn't, but we'll certainly explore it.
Scott?
Mitch, I have two short ones for you. I'll just ask them one at a time. One's on Gordon Hayward and one on LaMelo. But for Hayward, you mentioned him being your best player, and I don't think anyone would argue that. He was having a great year, but injuries always, are a part of his story, or have been sometimes in the past. And I wondered if you worried about that going forward, that you have, 3 more years of a great player, but also one that missed 40% of this year's games.
Well, we worry, about all the players and the injuries going forward. You're correct. Gordon's had his fair share of injuries. I've been assured that with the next 4 months off, when the season starts next year, he'll be 100%. Now, does something happen next year? Of course it can happen. Knock on wood, it doesn't happen. Before he got hurt, he was an all-star caliber player. And we knew that going into it. He passed all the physicals, that we gave him. And the injury that he had nothing to do with past injuries. This was a completely new injury. So next year, we expect him to be 100%. And he's excited about the offseason. He really hasn't had an offseason in a number of years where he can, not only get well, because he'll be well in a couple, 3 weeks, but actually work on his game for 2 months.
And the one about LaMelo quickly is just, so you obviously saw something in him that has been proven right, given the accolades he's about to receive, but he's obviously got a long way to go still to become that truly great franchise player. So as a GM, as a former player, what do you think is the number one thing he needs to work on?
Well, he's got to get stronger. He's still a 19-year-old, kid, playing a game where a lot of the big players are 270, 280 pounds. He needs to get stronger. His skill level is pretty good. I don't worry about his shooting. That's something that we felt very comfortable with before the draft. Playing games, decisions, He really hasn't had consistent coaching in 4 years, 5 years. So having, a coach year to year on the defensive side of the ball that can, sit down and look at film from game to game, week to week, month to month, year to year, that's an area of growth that has to be improved. There's a lot of good stuff, but to be a great player in this league, every off season, you've got to come back better at something that you were the season before. That's what all great players do. They work on something, whether it's a weekend or a post-up game. They come back and they're always better. So he's got a really, really good foundation. Clearly, we're happy to have him, but there's still a lot of work to get done. The good thing is he is a gym rat. He loves the game and he loves to work. Nothing makes him happier than being in a gym.
Thank you, Mitch.
Mike?
Thanks, Mike. Hey, Mitch, good to see you again. The question that I have for you is you've covered a lot of ground today, praising the coaches and the job they did and saying that the team took a step forward. But as the GM, how do you divorce yourself from the frustrations of not going further, with also taking into account the learning process that this group has had to go through, and the teaching job the coaches have had to do, and all the things that have been working? But you still want to win. You still want to see the progress. How do you divorce yourself from the frustrations of that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I found myself getting caught up in the moment, right? There was a period when we were in the 4th best record in the East. And, then we got hit with the injuries and we were at 6 for a long time. And then we were at 8 a long time. And, expectations rose. And, all of a sudden now you're saying to yourself, well, we can get in the playoffs. Maybe we can win around. Be a great experience, for our young players. Look what Miami did last year. You never know. Maybe you get lucky this year. So, I found myself, from time to time thinking that way. You got to step back, and as painful as it was to sit there in that game in Indianapolis and watch that game, and the airplane ride home, and then just getting through yesterday, you kind of have to keep your eye on the big picture, right? The reality is we're trying to build something that's sustainable, that can advance in the playoffs. With LaMelo getting hurt, Gordon going down, just the various things that we dealt with in our small margin of error, we were not that team this year. Okay, unless we really, really struck a chord of luck, we were probably not going to advance multiple rounds into the playoffs. During the off season, we have to be careful. If we're going to spend our money, we have to make sure that, we keep our eye out on the next, 2 years or 3 years, and not solely focus on 1 year. And then if we do that, then we could be, in trouble, right? You could be in a bad spot with no flexibility. And now if there's an injury going forward, or you can have the ability to make a deal the next summer, you don't have that ability anymore. So we've got to be careful. And it's a balance. Yes, we're not trying to put off winning. I think everybody on this call knows we have an owner who's very competitive and would have liked nothing more, than to have been in the playoffs this year. Okay, but we have to catch ourselves and, balance it, right? Is there a way to grow the team, get into the playoffs, get some experience, yet keep in mind that it's not about just getting in and losing in 7 or losing in 6 or 5 or 4. It's really about trying to build something greater than that.
James?
Hey, Mitch. James Plowright at The Hive. Yesterday, JB talked about being part of elite defenses, which always had a lot of size and length. I'm just wondering if that's a kind of a characteristic that you guys are really focusing on in terms of roster building heading into the offseason?
Well, I think we've made, progress in our offense and our defense. Our style of play, kind of indicates that we've made progress. I think we're fun to watch. We're not the longest team and we're not the biggest team. And clearly, on the defensive end, if you can establish a bedrock, a foundation, that will sustain you through those periods of the season where maybe you can't score, or maybe an injured player who provides 20 points a game, you could somehow withstand it. Based on, the players we had, everybody had a chip in. Everybody had a chip in to rebound. Everybody had a chip in to protect the rim. In the perfect world, I'd love to get, players that make it easier on everybody. But the defensive end is an area that we need to continue to focus on, and we've gotten better.
Thank you.
Will?
Hey, Mitch, this is going to be a weird question, but scrolling through social media this year and watching SportsCenter this year, you see a lot of Miles Bridges, you see a lot of LaMelo Ball, you hear Eric Collins all over the place going viral. Does that have an impact on a franchise and recruiting and just kind of being more known around the league as a destination someone wants to go, or because it's something that we just haven't seen, in years past, honestly?
Yeah, I think it does. Right. I think getting Gordon, last summer was a big step for us. A major free agent, chose to come here. Social media, cannot be underestimated, the impact, that it has, in, those of us, I'm not one of them, but those who are 30 years and younger, right? And that's a big part of the NBA's fan base. Creates a lot of excitement, a lot of exposure, whether it's, LaMelo or Miles, Eric, I love, watching our games. You don't get any more energy than you would with our commentators watching our games on TV. So at the end of the day, right, that's all good. But you have to string together wins too. And that other stuff is great as long as we can string together wins. And I think it's great for the franchise. It creates I don't want to use the word buzz, right? But it creates a buzz about the franchise that maybe wasn't here a year ago. And I think that's good. And we got to build on that. We got to take advantage of it. And we got to get people in the building next year. Our players love to play in front of fans. This year was so difficult. The first half of the year, when there was literally nobody in the stands, it's like playing 5-on-5 in an empty gym. They did it and they competed, but it completely takes away the home court advantage and the fun of playing a game at home. So to the extent that the fans have even more interest next year, because of all that stuff we just talked about, I think that's great and that'll help us win games.
Danny?
Mitch, Danny Thompson with the 3-point conversion. Great to see you as always. You mentioned at one point the excitement level for you was there when the team was in 4th place. Now, as you look into the offseason and you look into the draft, is this team, are you looking for that one piece to add on to this group? Or are you looking to get the best player available, not necessarily in the draft, but also in free agency as well, too?
Well, I think we're in a little better position today than we were a year ago. I think a year ago, I would have said something like, we need to just add talent and not worry so much about position, because we just didn't have the talent level, to be that picky. Okay, I do think, knock on wood, I think we're good at the wing. I'm hoping, Melo can pick up where he left off before he got injured. If so, then I think we're good at that spot too. So we can afford to be a little bit more selective this year than we were a year ago. But when I spoke earlier about, our margin of talent not being good enough, it's still not good enough. We saw that, right? When we had a couple players go down, and more than a couple, the guys we had, tried to step up, but, along the way, we also wore out, some of the other players that played big minutes. And in the perfect world, you would have liked to have kept guys as fresh as possible. So, we're just not good enough right now to, completely look for position and draft or trade or pursue free agency that way. But we're certainly better than we were a year ago.
And one quick follow-up to that, or quick follow-up, second question. When it comes to LaMelo, you had been around Kobe Bryant when he was around the same age. What are some of the similarities in as far as the work ethic and preparation between Kobe or LaMelo, or what would you like to see LaMelo do that was kind of similar to what Kobe had did in his development?
Yeah, I'm going to decline to compare the two. Okay.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I don't think it's fair, to either player, right? LaMelo is a gym rat. He loves to play the game. He's a great teammate, and he loves to compete. And those, and work, right? He just wants to be in the gym. And those kinds of qualities, along with some God-given ability, can lead to greatness. Now, if you don't work, then you won't get any better. But he's got the intangibles and he's got some God-given talent that can lead to a special player. But he's got a long way to go.
Rick?
Mitch, you very understandably said when you first came here that you couldn't have an expectation that this would be a free agent destination. Do you feel any differently about that subject now?
Well, I do. I mean, getting Gordon, right? I even said it last year, during the pursuit, to be honest with you, I never really had 100% confidence that it was serious. I didn't know why a guy would opt out of a contract in Boston. And, we didn't have a great year. We had a couple of nice players, but, why would he come to Charlotte, right? But he did. And I think that'll help us with future free agents. I think we play the right way. I think free agents around the league, look at the pace at which we play, and players want to play that way. I think we have a player's coach. And if LaMelo continues to develop and remember the reason why he's so much fun to play with, which is his ability to pass, then I don't know why players wouldn't want to come here to play with him. Now, I remember when we were recruiting Gordon, we had no clue as to how quickly LaMelo would develop. But one thing we did say to him is that if he's as good as we think he is, you'll love playing with him because he loves to pass the ball and he's a pass first player. So those are things that bode well for us in the free agent market. But we've got to build on that. It can go south quick, right? I mean, we've got something that's good, that's fun. We've got flexibility. Guys get along. There's some excitement. We've got some upside. So I think those are things that are attractive to free agents. And I wouldn't be surprised, although I wouldn't count on it, I wouldn't be surprised if we did have a shot at another free agent.
Are you comfortable with JB going into next season on the last season on his contract?
I think he's done a great job. Yes.
We will wrap it up with Rod Boone.
Hey, Mitch, you mentioned LaMelo's development and how big it is for him. Just wondering, with Summer League being announced formally yesterday, will he participate in Summer League? And if so, how much do you think that will benefit him going toward next season?
It really hasn't been discussed. He got an awful lot of experience this season, playing NBA games. I'm not sure, how much it would benefit him. It's really more for rookies and maybe players that did not get a chance to play this year. But the thing that would trump that, right, is, the state of his wrist, which we think will be fine. So really the first thing is to get him healthy. And I don't think that's going to be a problem, certainly by August 1st. But that's not a decision we've made right now. If I had to guess, like I said, I think that's more for players that didn't get a chance to play this year.
Awesome. Thanks, Mitch. Appreciate your time this afternoon.
Thanks, Mitch.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch.
Media, that will wrap up our 2-day session. Appreciate all your time today and yesterday, and appreciate your time throughout this season and efforts covering our team. We will talk to you down the road as news comes about this offseason. Thanks a lot.